The night sky over the ruins burned with streaks of falling debris. Each fiery trail marked the death of another ship. Somewhere above the clouds, two great armies fought for control of the sector. On the ground, the city lay silent except for the distant echo of collapsing towers and the hiss of smoke winding through broken streets. Among the shadows, a human named Daniel moved quickly, searching for survivors among the wreckage. He had been left behind after the first wave of evacuations, and now he was alone in enemy territory. Daniel's boots crunched over shattered glass as he turned a corner. The smell of scorched metal and ozone clung to the air. He kept his rifle close, eyes scanning for movement. The alien forces were known for their speed and cunning, and any mistake could mean death. Then, in the dim blue light of a collapsed wall, he saw something move. It was not the heavy silhouette of an armored soldier, but the slim shape of a woman. She was crouched low, her skin glowing faintly like the surface of a calm ocean under moonlight. Her hair shimmered in two-tone soft pink fading into pale violet, and her long pointed ears marked her as something far from human. White, vein-like patterns pulsed faintly across her arms and legs as if her body carried light inside it. She looked up at him with eyes too large and bright for this dark world. Daniel tightened his grip on his rifle, but she didn't move to attack. Instead, she raised her hands slowly, showing they were empty. Her lips parted, and her voice came in a trembling whisper, clear despite the distance between them. "Let me hide here," she said, "and I'll give you what no human woman can." Daniel's breath caught. He didn't know if it was a trap, but her words carried something more than desperation. There was fear in her gaze, but also a spark of defiance. She looked like she had been running for hours, her clothing torn at the edges, a thin layer of dust covering her glowing skin. He didn't lower his weapon, but he took a step closer. The war had taught him that trust could be deadly, but something about her felt different, like she wasn't part of the soldiers hunting him. The sound of boots echoed from a nearby street. Heavy metallic steps, alien pursuit units. She flinched at the sound and looked toward the noise, then back at him. "Please," she urged, her voice sharper now. "If they find me, they'll kill us both." Her words were quick, but her eyes never left his. Daniel glanced at the narrow alley behind her, a dark slit between broken buildings. He knew the patrol would be here in seconds. Helping her would mean risking his life. Leaving her would mean letting her die. He hated choices like this, but the war never gave easy ones. He jerked his head toward the alley. "Move," he said. She didn't hesitate. Her movements were graceful but fast, almost too fast for a human to match. They slipped into the darkness, the sound of the patrol growing louder behind them. Daniel kept low, following her as she weaved through debris like she had lived in these streets her whole life. He didn't understand why he was helping her, but something told him this moment would change everything. The glow from her skin lit the path just enough for him to see without tripping. It was strange, moving toward danger because of someone he had met seconds ago. They stopped inside a collapsed storage bay. She crouched near the wall, her hands pressed to the ground as if feeling for something. Daniel stayed at the entrance, watching the street outside. The patrol passed without looking in, their voices metallic and sharp. When the noise faded, he finally turned to her. "You said you'd give me something no human woman can," he said quietly. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something beyond fear. There was purpose there, and something dangerous, like she knew a truth he didn't yet understand. Daniel didn't speak for a moment. He was still trying to understand what she had said. The light from her skin dimmed slightly as she lowered her hands. She seemed exhausted, but there was still strength in her posture. He had seen fear before, but hers was mixed with something else. It was almost like she was carrying a secret that she was afraid to reveal, yet desperate to share. "What do you mean by that?" Daniel asked in a low voice. His eyes flicked toward the street outside. The patrol had moved on, but they could return any moment. She stayed crouched, her breathing slowing as if she was forcing herself to calm down. Her gaze locked onto his with an intensity that made him uneasy. "I mean, I can help you survive this war in a way no human can," she replied. "But only if you promise to keep me safe." Daniel wasn't sure if he could believe her. She looked too strange, too alien, yet something about her words stirred a curiosity he couldn't shake. Her voice carried a confidence that didn't match her desperate state. He remembered the way she had moved through the ruins, silent and quick. She wasn't just a helpless civilian. There was skill in her. Skill that could be useful if she was telling the truth. "You think I'm going to trust you that easily?" he said. His voice was quiet, but his suspicion was clear. She tilted her head slightly, her bright eyes unblinking. "I think you don't have a choice," she answered. Daniel clenched his jaw. She wasn't wrong. Alone in this war-torn city, allies were rare, and survival often depended on taking risks. He didn't like it, but his instincts told him to listen. She shifted her position and pulled something from a small pouch at her side. It was a thin metallic shard with faint symbols etched into it. The markings glowed softly, almost in rhythm, with the light in her skin. "This is a locator disruptor," she said. "If I activate it, they won't be able to track us for several hours. I stole it from one of their commanders." Daniel stared at the device. If it worked, it could give them the time they needed to move safely. "Why give this to me?" he asked. Her answer came without hesitation. "Because if you die, I die. And because I think you're not like the others I've met." There was no flattery in her tone. It was a simple statement, but it made him wonder what kind of humans she had encountered before. He nodded slowly. "Activate it," he said. She pressed her fingers to the shard, and it pulsed brighter before fading to a dull glow. A faint hum filled the air, then stopped. She slipped it back into the pouch and stood, moving toward the darker side of the room. "We should go deeper into the ruins," she said. "The patrols won't stop searching. If they find me, it won't just be your life they take." Daniel followed her through a narrow passage blocked in places by fallen beams and broken walls. The glow from her skin lit the way, casting strange patterns on the jagged surfaces. It felt like they were walking through the bones of the city. He wondered how much of it had been destroyed by humans, and how much by her people. Neither side seemed innocent in this war. They stopped inside what used to be a storage chamber. Dust hung in the air, disturbed by their steps. She moved to a corner and knelt, brushing away debris to reveal a hidden hatch. Daniel's hand instinctively went to his weapon. "Where does it lead?" he asked. She looked up at him, her face serious. "Somewhere safe. For now." Daniel considered the risk. He could be walking into a trap, but the patrols were getting closer again. He could hear faint echoes of their steps and the distant growl of their machines. He gave her a short nod. She opened the hatch, and a rush of cool air rose from below. Without another word, she climbed down into the darkness, her glowing markings vanishing into the shadows. Daniel climbed down after her, his boots landing on cold metal. The air below smelled different, untouched by smoke or fire. A faint glow from her skin gave the narrow tunnel an otherworldly light. She moved ahead without hesitation, her footsteps light and sure. It was clear she knew this place well, and that made Daniel uneasy. He didn't like being led somewhere he couldn't control, but turning back was not an option now. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber deep underground. Old machinery stood against the walls, covered in dust and strange markings. It was silent except for the distant drip of water. She stepped to the center of the room and turned to face him. "We can rest here for a while," she said. Her voice was calm now, but her eyes still held that sharp alertness. Daniel lowered his rifle slightly but did not relax. He scanned the walls and ceiling, noting the faded symbols. They weren't human. Some were carved deep into the metal, others painted in glowing pigment. "This was built by my people long before the war," she explained. "It's one of the few places they haven't found yet." Daniel frowned. "Why show it to me?" She met his gaze steadily. "Because if you're going to protect me, you need to know what's worth protecting." Her words were bold, but they carried a strange weight. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He set his pack down and leaned against a rusted console. "I still don't know your name," he said. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Callus." The name felt sharp and soft at the same time. "And you're Daniel," she added. He gave a short nod. "So Callus, tell me why you're so important that they'd kill to find you." She drew a breath and walked to one of the old machines. Her fingers brushed over its surface, and the dust seemed to retreat from her touch. The glowing lines on her skin brightened slightly. "I'm not just a fugitive," she said. "I'm the last one who knows how to access something your people don't even believe exists." Daniel straightened. "And what's that?" Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "The core." Daniel had heard the name before, in passing whispers among soldiers and refugees. Some said it was a myth, others claimed it was a weapon, and a few believed it was a source of limitless energy. "Why would you tell me this?" he asked. Callus met his eyes without fear. "Because you're already part of it now. The moment you saved me, you became a piece of the story whether you wanted or not." He pushed off the console and walked closer. "If the core is real, why haven't they used it already?" She shook her head. "Because they can't, not without me. And now that I'm here, they'll stop at nothing to take me alive." Her tone was steady, but Daniel could hear the edge of worry beneath it. He knew then that helping her was far more dangerous than he had imagined. A faint vibration ran through the floor, and both of them froze. Daniel raised his rifle while Callus tilted her head as if listening to something. "Far away, scanners," she said quickly. "They're searching for us from above. We need to move deeper." She crossed the room to another narrow passage hidden behind a panel. Daniel followed, every muscle tense. The deeper they went, the more the air grew cold and heavy. The passage led them to a vertical shaft with a narrow ladder. Callus climbed. First, her glowing markings casting shifting light on the metal walls. Daniel kept one hand on the ladder and the other on his weapon. The shaft seemed to go on forever, until finally they reached a platform lit by soft blue crystals embedded in the walls. Callus stepped aside to let him join her, then pointed toward a set of sealed doors at the far end. "That's where we need to go," she said. Daniel glanced at the doors. They were massive, reinforced, and clearly ancient. "What's behind them?" he asked. Callus' expression turned unreadable. "The reason I can offer you what no human woman can. The reason you might survive this war when so many others won't." Daniel stepped closer to the sealed doors. The surface was smooth and cold, with faint lines running across it like veins. They pulsed with a dim light, as if sensing their presence. He had seen high-security vaults before, but this felt different. The air around it carried a strange energy that made his skin tingle. Callus stood beside him, her glowing markings brightening as she placed her hand on the surface. The lines on the door responded instantly, flaring with a soft blue light that spread outward in delicate patterns. A low hum filled the chamber, and Daniel felt the vibration in his chest. "It knows me," Callus said quietly. "This vault has been sealed for centuries, and it will only open for someone of my bloodline." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly is inside?" She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Hope, power, the one thing that could change the course of this war." Daniel didn't like vague answers, but he could see in her eyes that she believed what she was saying. He studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. Instead, he saw resolve, the kind that came from carrying a burden too heavy for most to bear. "If it's that important, Then they'll come here, he said. We can't just stand around. Callus nodded. Then we open it now before they do. She pressed both hands against the glowing lines. Her markings brightened until the chamber was awash in blue light. The hum grew louder, and the sealed doors began to shift. Dust fell from the ceiling as ancient mechanisms stirred. Slowly, the massive panels parted, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Cold air flowed out, carrying the scent of something untouched. For ages, Daniel adjusted his grip on his rifle and followed her inside. The passage opened into a vast circular chamber lined with crystalline structures. They glowed softly, casting light across the polished floor. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it rested a sphere of shifting light, colors moving across its surface like liquid fire. Daniel stared at it, unable to look away. That's the core? He asked. Callus stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the sphere. Yes, it holds the combined knowledge and energy of my people. Enough to rebuild or destroy entire worlds. Daniel felt the weight of her words. If what she said was true, this was more valuable than any weapon he had ever seen. So you're saying you can use this to end the war? He asked. Callus glanced at him over her shoulder. I can, but it comes with a cost. Once I bond with it, I'll never be able to leave it unprotected. My life will be tied to it, and so will yours if you choose to stand with me. He took a step closer, the glow of the core reflecting in his eyes. Why involve me? He asked. Callus' expression softened. Because I've seen your kind fight. You don't give up, even when the odds are impossible. I can't do this alone, and I believe you'll fight for something greater than just survival. Her voice was steady, but Daniel could feel the sincerity in it. It was not flattery, but trust. Before he could answer, a sharp noise echoed through the chamber. The sound of metal striking stone. Daniel turned toward the passage they had come through, his rifle raised. Shadows moved against the light, and the faint red glow of enemy scanners swept across the walls. Callus' face tightened. They've found us, she said. Her hands curled into fists, the markings on her skin flaring brighter. Daniel shifted his stance, ready for a fight. They can't be allowed to touch the core, she said firmly. Daniel gave a short nod. Then we make our stand here. He positioned himself between the entrance and the pedestal, while Callus moved to the sphere, her fingers hovering just above its surface. The hum in the chamber deepened, and the crystals along the walls brightened as if responding to her will. Outside the passage, the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. The air filled with the sharp scent of heated metal. Daniel's pulse quickened, but his grip on the rifle remained steady. He glanced back at Callus. She looked at him once, her eyes fierce and unyielding. When I call, you move. No hesitation, she said. Daniel gave a single firm nod. The first enemy soldier emerged from the tunnel, his armor reflecting the blue light of the core. Daniel fired before the alien could raise his weapon. The blast struck clean, dropping him instantly. The sound echoed across the chamber, followed by the rapid footsteps of more soldiers. Callus kept her hands poised over the core, her eyes closed in deep concentration. Energy pulsed faintly through the air, making Daniel's hair stand on end. 2 more soldiers rushed in, moving low and fast. Daniel pivoted, firing in quick bursts. The shots cut through the air, forcing one to dive behind a crystal pillar while the other fell to the ground. The hum of the core deepened, and the glow from the walls intensified. Callus spoke without opening her eyes. Hold them back just a little longer, she said. Her voice was steady, but Daniel could hear the strain behind it. Another wave came through, this time with heavier armor. Daniel switched to controlled shots, aiming for the joints. Sparks flew as rounds punched through weak points, slowing them down. One alien raised a plasma launcher, but before he could fire, Callus lifted her hand toward him. A surge of blue light shot from the core, striking the weapon and shattering it into pieces. Daniel glanced at her in surprise, but she was already. Focusing again, the chamber shook slightly as more enemies pressed forward. Daniel backed toward the pedestal, using the crystals for cover. "There's too many," he warned. Kellis' expression tightened. "Then it's time," she said. Her hands pressed fully onto the core, and the sphere flared so bright that Daniel had to shield his eyes. A deep, resonant sound filled the chamber, like the heartbeat of something far larger than any one being. When he looked again, Kellis' markings were blazing with light, and streams of energy flowed from the core into her. The air felt charged, as if every particle was alive. The soldiers hesitated at the sight, their weapons lowering slightly. Daniel didn't waste the moment. He fired again, dropping 2 before they regained focus. Kellis opened her eyes, and they glowed the same shifting colors as the core. "Stay close to me," she said. Daniel moved to her side without question. She lifted one hand toward the tunnel, and a wave of shimmering energy rolled outward, slamming into the advancing soldiers. They were thrown back as if hit by an invisible wall. Some didn't get up. Others scrambled to retreat, but Kellis wasn't done. Another pulse followed, sealing the entrance with a wall of solid crystal pulled from the ground itself. Silence filled the chamber, except for the lingering hum of the core. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly, his breathing heavy. "What did you just do?" he asked. Kellis looked at him, her glowing eyes calm but intense. "I bonded with it. The core is now a part of me. And as long as I live, no one can take it." Her voice carried no triumph, only certainty. Daniel realized then that her earlier words had been literal. His life was tied to hers now. She stepped down from the pedestal, her glow fading slightly, but never disappearing. The air felt lighter, yet he could sense the power still surrounding her. "They'll come back," he said. "Stronger." Kellis nodded. "And we'll be ready. But we can't stay here forever. The core has to be moved to a place they can't reach." Daniel frowned. "You mean somewhere outside their territory?" Her eyes narrowed. "No, somewhere they'd never dare enter." Daniel studied her, trying to guess what she meant. But before he could ask, a deep rumble echoed from far above. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the crystals flickered briefly. Kellis turned toward the sound, her expression darkening. "They've brought siege weapons," she said. "We need to leave now." She moved toward the sealed doors, placing her hand against them. The surface shifted and opened just enough for them to pass through. Daniel followed her into the dark passage beyond, the glow from her skin lighting their path. His mind was racing. Whatever she planned next would be dangerous, but he was already too deep to turn back. If the core truly was the key to ending the war, then protecting her was no longer just a choice. It was the only path left to take. Asterisk, the tunnel beyond the sealed doors sloped upward, the air thick with dust and the faint scent of burning metal. Daniel stayed close behind Kellis, his rifle ready. The distant rumble of siege fire echoed through the stone, each impact shaking the ground beneath their feet. Her glowing markings cast enough light for him to see, but shadows seemed to press in from all sides. He could hear faint cracks forming in the walls with every vibration. They reached a narrow crossing where the ceiling had partially collapsed. Kellis moved quickly, weaving through the jagged rubble with practiced steps. Daniel followed, his boots crunching against loose stone. A sudden tremor made part of the wall break away, sending debris crashing to the floor behind them. "There. Getting closer," he said. Kellis didn't look back. "Then we move faster," she replied. Her tone was calm, but the urgency in her movements told a different story. The path widened into an open chamber, filled with old machinery and storage. Crates. Daniel scanned the space for threats, but it seemed abandoned. Kellis walked to a wall panel and placed her hand against it. Faint lines of light spread from her touch, and a section of the wall shifted open to reveal a hidden stairway. "This leads to the upper levels," she said. Daniel nodded, keeping his weapon ready as they began to climb. Halfway up, the sound of footsteps echoed from below. Daniel turned, spotting movement in the shadows. The enemy had found the entrance. He fired a quick burst, forcing them to duck for cover. "Keep going," he called to Khalees. She moved faster, her glow leaving streaks of light on the walls. Daniel backed up the stairs, firing in controlled bursts to slow the pursuers. The tight space gave him the advantage, but he knew it wouldn't last. They burst into another tunnel, this one lit by faint daylight filtering in from ahead. The air was cooler, carrying the smell of open space. Khalees glanced back at him. "Almost there," she said. Daniel quickened his pace, eager to leave the claustrophobic tunnels behind. But as they neared the exit, a shadow moved across the light. A squad of enemy soldiers stood blocking the way, their weapons already aimed. Daniel dove behind a section of collapsed wall as the first shots rang out. Khalees dropped low, her markings flaring brightly. A pulse of energy burst from her hand, striking the ground near the soldiers and throwing them off balance. Daniel used the moment to fire, hitting two before they could recover. The rest retreated slightly, regrouping for another attack. "We can't stay pinned here," he said. Khalees nodded, her eyes narrowing as she prepared another strike. This time, the energy from the core surged stronger. Khalees swept her arm forward, sending a wall of force that shattered the enemy line. The air crackled, and the tunnel shook with the impact. Daniel stepped over the fallen soldiers, keeping his rifle trained ahead. Khalees followed, her breathing heavy from the effort. "The surface is close," she said. "Once we're out, we need to head for the ridge beyond the city." They emerged into the open, the ruined city stretching out before them. Smoke rose from distant fires, and the sky was filled with the faint glow of ships circling above. Daniel scanned the streets for movement, but the silence was deceptive. Khalees pointed toward a narrow path winding through the rubble. "That way," she said. "It will take us to the ridge without crossing open ground." Daniel didn't question her route. She had proven she knew these ruins better than anyone. As they moved, the sound of engines grew louder from above. A shadow passed over them, and Daniel looked up to see a gunship sweeping low. "Down," he said sharply. They ducked behind a collapsed building as the ship's scanner swept the area. Khalees pressed her back to the wall, her glow dimming to blend with the shadows. The ship lingered for a moment before pulling away, the roar of its engines fading. Into the distance, Daniel exhaled slowly and glanced at her. "If they're bringing ships, it means they're desperate," he said. Khalees' gaze was steady. "Then we have even less time than I thought. We have to reach the ridge before nightfall." Her voice carried the weight of certainty, and Daniel knew she was right. The city was no longer just a battlefield. It was a trap closing in around them. They moved quickly through the winding path, keeping low among the ruins. The ridge Khalees had mentioned rose in the distance, its rocky slope catching the pale light from the fading sun. Daniel kept his rifle ready, scanning every shadow for movement. The city behind them was now filled with distant booms as siege fire continued to pound the lower districts. Each blast sent a faint vibration through the ground, a reminder that time was running out. The path narrowed between two collapsed structures, forcing them to move single file. Khalees led the way, her glowing markings faint but still visible in the dim light. Daniel followed close behind, listening to the faint crunch of their steps on scattered debris. "Once we reach the ridge, what then?" he asked. Khalees didn't slow her pace. "There's a hidden pass on the other side. It leads to a sanctuary my people built long before the war began." Daniel didn't like the sound of hiding forever, but he knew they had little choice for now. The core had to be kept away from the enemy at all costs. As they emerged from the narrow gap, the terrain opened into a broad stretch of rubble-strewn ground. Kellis raised a hand, signaling him to stop. She scanned the horizon before speaking. "We're exposed here. Keep moving and don't stop unless I say so." They began crossing the open ground, moving quickly but carefully. Halfway across, Daniel caught sight of movement on the ridge. Figures were emerging from the rocks, their silhouettes sharp against the sky. "Contact," he warned. Kellis looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Scouts," she said. "They must have tracked us from the city." Daniel shifted his stance, aiming toward the advancing figures as they began to spread out. The first shot came from above, striking the ground near his feet. Daniel returned fire, forcing the enemy to take cover among the rocks. Kellis sprinted toward a jagged outcrop, using it for cover. Her hands glowed brighter, and a pulse of energy shot upward, striking one of the scouts and sending him tumbling down the slope. Daniel kept firing, his shots precise and controlled, but the enemy's numbers were growing. "We can't win this fight out in the open," Daniel called. Kellis glanced toward the base of the ridge. "Then we don't. We reach the pass and seal it behind us." She began moving along the side of the slope, keeping low to avoid the enemy's aim. Daniel followed, covering her with bursts of fire whenever an alien tried to flank them. The ground was uneven, each step a careful balance. Between speed and stability, they reached a narrow cleft in the rocks, almost hidden from view unless you knew it was there. Kellis darted inside, her glow lighting the way through the shadows. Daniel followed, the sound of enemy fire fading slightly behind them. The passage twisted and climbed, the air growing cooler with each step. "How far?" he asked. "Not far," she replied. "But we'll need to move faster. They won't give up the chase so easily." The cleft opened onto a steep ledge overlooking a narrow valley. Far below, Daniel could see the faint shimmer of water and the outline of ancient stone structures. Kellis pointed toward the largest. "One. That's the sanctuary. If we can reach it, we'll be safe for a time." Daniel scanned the path down, noting the loose rocks and sharp drops. It would be a dangerous descent, especially with the enemy close behind. A distant shout echoed from the ridge above. Daniel turned to see the scouts reappearing at the entrance to the cleft. "They found us," he said. Kellis placed a hand on the rock wall, and the markings on her skin flared brightly. The stone began to shift, sealing the cleft behind them with a solid barrier. "That will slow them," she said. "But it won't stop them for long." Daniel nodded, gripping his rifle tighter as they started down the ledge. The descent was slow and tense, every sound amplified by the quiet of the valley. Daniel kept checking the ridge above, half expecting to see the enemy find another way down. Kellis moved with steady confidence, guiding him along the safest routes. At last, the path leveled out, and the sanctuary stood before them, its weathered walls and tall gates waiting like a silent sentinel against the coming storm. The sanctuary gates loomed ahead, tall and reinforced with stone and metal. They were marked with the same glowing symbols Daniel had seen deep underground. Kellis approached them with steady steps, her markings brightening in response to the ancient wards. The gates rumbled as they slowly opened, revealing a courtyard. Beyond, Daniel entered behind her, scanning every corner for movement. The place felt untouched by the chaos outside, its air cool and heavy with age. Inside the courtyard, towering statues of alien warriors lined the walls, each holding a weapon carved from crystal. Water flowed from a fountain at the center, its clear surface reflecting the pale light of the setting sun. Kellis walked toward the fountain and placed her hand on its rim. "This is the heart of the sanctuary," she said. "It will shield us from their scanners and keep the core hidden." Daniel lowered his rifle but didn't relax entirely. He studied the architecture, noting how every wall was angled for defense. Whoever built this place had designed it to withstand siege. "How long will this shield last?" he asked. Kellis looked at him with calm certainty. "As long as I live," she said. The weight of her words was not lost on him. He understood now that protecting her was no longer just about survival. It was about safeguarding something far greater than himself. Low rumble echoed from outside the gates. Daniel moved to the entrance and saw dust rising along the ridge. The enemy had found another route down into the valley. He turned back toward Kellis. "They're coming," he warned. She stepped forward, her eyes fierce. "Then we end this here." She moved to the center of the courtyard, the glow of her markings spreading across the ground like streams of light. Daniel took position at the gate, his rifle aimed at the approaching figures. The first wave of soldiers charged down the slope, weapons firing. Daniel returned fire, each shot precise and deliberate. The gate's narrow opening gave him the advantage, forcing them to approach in smaller numbers. Behind him, Kellis raised her hands, and a shimmering barrier formed just beyond the gate. The incoming fire splashed harmlessly against it, the energy dispersing in flashes of blue. The enemy pressed harder, their shouts echoing through the valley. Daniel kept firing, covering every angle as best he could. Kellis' barrier held, but the strain was visible in her face. Her breathing grew heavier, and the glow of her markings flickered. "You can't keep this up forever," Daniel called. She shook her head slightly. "I don't need to, just long enough." Her voice carried a finality that made Daniel glance back at her. She stepped away from the barrier and toward the fountain. Her hands hovered over the water, and the surface began to swirl with light. Daniel felt the air grow warmer, charged with a deep hum that vibrated through the ground. The core's energy was flowing through her in waves, and the entire sanctuary seemed to respond. The statues began to glow, their crystal weapons lighting up with blinding intensity. The moment the enemy broke through the outer perimeter, Kellis thrust her hands toward the gates. The statues unleashed beams of pure energy, cutting through the attackers with unstoppable force. The valley lit up in bursts of blue and white, and the ground shook under the sheer power of the assault. Daniel shielded his eyes from the brightness, the sound of battle filling his ears. When the light finally dimmed, the gate stood closed again, and the valley was silent. Kellis lowered her hands slowly, her glow fading to a soft pulse. Daniel stepped toward her, his rifle lowering. "It's over," he said. She gave a tired smile. "For now." She looked toward the core's resting place, her expression unreadable. "They will come again, and again. But as long as we stand together, they will never take it." Daniel met her gaze and knew she meant every word. The sanctuary fell into stillness once more. Outside its walls, the war raged on, but inside, there was a fragile peace. Daniel took one last look at the valley beyond, then turned back to Kellis. In that moment, he understood that his life had changed forever. She had given him something no human woman could purpose beyond himself, and a cause worth every risk.